Financial modeling can be incredibly frustrating. You spend hours building a model only to realize you've been on the wrong path the entire time. Maybe you picked the wrong model type, or you suddenly discover you need completely different inputs. And now you have to start from scratch. I learned this the hard way during my 10 years in FP&A leadership roles at P&G, Unilever, and Squarespace. So in this video, I'm breaking down the 7 most common financial modeling mistakes that are costing you time, credibility, and accuracy, and more importantly, explain how to avoid them. Let's get into it. Mistake number 1, facing complex issues head on. So here's what most people do wrong. They jump straight into building the model without really understanding the situation. They open Excel and start creating formulas before they've asked the right questions. And look, I get it. When you're under pressure to deliver a forecast, it's tempting to just dive in and start building. But this is such a big mistake, because what happens is you spend hours building this model only to realize you chose the wrong approach entirely. Or worse, you discover you need completely different inputs than what you started with. Now you're basically starting from scratch again, and you've wasted a ton of time and energy. My mentors at P&G and Unilever taught me how to avoid this issue. First, take a step back and ask yourself these questions. Do I thoroughly understand the situation here? What decision are leaders trying to make based on my model? Do we need to take the time value of money into account by building a discounted cash flow model? Or is this only a short planning horizon, which means a return on investment model is fine? Do I have recurring revenues from the same customers, which would mean I need to build a customer lifetime value model? Or do I have all the inputs that are relevant, including external factors such as how our competitor will respond to what I'm modeling? And is there anything else I can do to stress test the assumptions before including them in my model? Ask these kinds of questions first before you dive into modeling, because when you do this, you save yourself hours of wasted work and you build the right model the first time. By the way, if you want to create perfect financial models, I've created a best practice financial modeling template. It includes everything I learned after building hundreds of financial models at P&G, Unilever, and Squarespace. Just click the first link in the description to download it for free. Now let's go to the second mistake, which is not getting a sounding board. Okay, so let's say you followed step 1, you've done your homework, you understand the situation, and you have what you think is a solid plan. Here's the thing though, even the best of us can be overconfident at times. Working in isolation is dangerous because you can't see your own blind spots. You might think you thought everything through, but I promise you, there are gaps you're not aware of. So here's the only way to catch these issues early. Walk someone else through your plan before you start building. And make sure you do it step by step instead of just giving them broad strokes. Explain the key assumptions of the model, where you got them from, and how you have vetted them. Then lay out how you plan to create the model, so it's optimized for fast iteration, yet robust and with a small surface area for mistakes. That's crucial. Most importantly, explain why you chose each path, because that's typically where you'll start to see that you haven't thought every aspect through enough. And the best part is, you'll realize this even if the other person isn't as knowledgeable as you are about modeling. Just getting a second set of eyes on your logic can often save you from going down the wrong path. Mistake number 3, assumption stacking. Alright, now let's talk about what happens once you actually start building. One of the biggest mistakes I see is assumption stacking. What this looks like is you're adding multiple variables on top of each other in your model. So for example, you might layer assumptions about market growth, pricing changes, competitive response, and customer behavior all at once. The problem is, when you stack assumptions like this, the margins of error can multiply. You end up with a forecast that has so much uncertainty baked in that it's almost meaningless. Plus, it becomes nearly impossible to analyze which business drivers are actually impacting your results. Here's a better approach. The more uncertainty in your business, the fewer assumptions you should include in your model. Start with the most critical variables and isolate them. Only add complexity after you've analyzed how sensitive your model is to each individual input. This makes it so much easier to explain to leadership what's driving the numbers and where the real risks are. Mistake number 4, skipping sensitivity analysis. This connects directly to what we just talked about. Once you've isolated your key assumptions, you need to test them. You see, your job as an FP&A professional isn't just to provide a number. It's to quantify the risk behind that number. Sensitivity analysis shows you which inputs have the biggest impact on your model. Let me give you an example. Let's say you reduce your projected revenue by just 5%. If that causes profit to fall below target, or if it turns the net present value of your project from positive to negative, then you're in trouble because there isn't enough margin for error. So why does this matter so much? Well, it helps your CFO understand what conservative estimates to communicate to investors. It enables better contingency planning, and it builds credibility because you're not just giving a single number, you're showing you understand the risks. To do this effectively, first, change individual inputs one at a time. Document how much each change impacts your forecast and focus your sensitivity analysis on the areas where you have the most uncertainty. Mistake number 5, showing only point estimates. Here's a misconception I see all the time. Analysts think that providing ranges makes them look uncertain or like they're lacking confidence. But actually, the opposite is true. Ranges, for example, revenue in Q1 is expected to range between 1.2 million and 1.4 million. These ranges are incredibly powerful for 3 reasons. First, they show the order of magnitude of uncertainty in your forecast. If the range is too broad, you may need to get back to your cross-functional business partner who gave you the inputs and see if you can help them narrowing the range. Second, your CFO knows what conservative estimate to communicate externally. And third, ranges enable scenario planning. Leaders can prepare contingency measures ahead of time if results come in at the lower end of the range. Let me give you a real example. When I led the annual budgeting process for revenue at Squarespace, we always ask budget owners to provide ranges for how their investments will likely contribute to revenue. Then we turned this into a driver-based plan with worst case, base case, and best case scenario. Then we'd refer back to this plan every month. If we hit the low end in revenue, we had already discussed which levers we could pull to get the highest return on investment and where to cut. If we hit the high end, we knew how we'd reinvest those gains. The bottom line is, ranges aren't a sign of uncertainty. They're the foundation for scenario planning. They show you've thought through the risks and opportunities, and they give leaders the information they need to make better decisions. Mistake number 6, only forecasting top-down. Here's the problem with only forecasting top-down. You're building bias into your model from the very start. Top-down forecasts tend to be overly aggressive because you're starting with an end result in mind and working backward. So what's the solution? Combine it with the true bottom-up forecast. A bottom-up approach looks at each project or business unit individually. Usually that's done not by finance, but by the budget owners, the different teams like the sales team, the marketing team, the product team, etc. And then you roll those bottom-up forecasts up to get your total forecast. The reason why combining both methods is so powerful is that on the one hand, top-down forecasts are usually too aggressive. On the other hand, bottom-up forecasts are often too conservative because people build in buffers at every layer. It's just human. If the forecast is created by the same people who have to deliver against it, then they will try to lower expectations. So when you compare the bottom-up against the top-down forecast, you can have data-based conversations about what's realistic. Not only will this yield a better forecast accuracy than either the top-down or the bottom-up version of the plan, it's also a great starting point for strategic discussions about trade-offs. Mistake number 7, no accountability from the business. Alright, this is the final piece that ties everything together. You can build the most technically perfect model, but if nobody feels accountable for it, it won't matter. The biggest mistake finance teams make is that they run the forecast independently without getting buy-in from business leaders. The problem is, if department heads don't feel accountable for delivering the forecast, it doesn't add much value. When there's no accountability, accuracy suffers sooner or later because the people closest to the business aren't invested in the numbers. When performance is off track, nobody takes action to course correct. Now your forecast just becomes a finance exercise instead of a strategic tool. So how do you create real accountability? You need to co-develop the assumptions with the teams who will execute them. For example, revenue forecast assumptions should be built with your sales or marketing teams. Make sure department heads are held accountable for delivering those numbers. Then it's your role as the finance business partner to provide challenge. You do this by asking challenging but fair questions about how they have come up with their assumptions, how they have vetted them, and which data points they have used. This way, when the forecast shows you're off track, someone will actually do something about it. You get more than just better accuracy. You get action and alignment across the organization. Now, of course, what I've shared with you today is just scratching the surface of what goes into building world-class financial models. Even if you avoid all these mistakes, you still need to know how to build the model in Excel so it's robust and error-free. That's why I created a best practice financial modeling template that will help you level up your financial modeling skills by walking you through 39 financial modeling standards and providing a template for implementing them. So click the first link in the description to download it for free. If you want to see my guide on financial modeling, then watch this video next.